Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call the State 911 Advisory Board meeting to order. I'd like to advise everyone that this meeting is being webcast on the Technology Agency website, and it's being taped as well. I will start with roll call. Sheriff Ed Bonner.
Chris Herron here for Sheriff Bonner.
Chief Reginald Chappelle. Just in the nick of time. Lisa Hoffman.
Here.
Chief Sam Spiegel.
Here.
Chip Yarborough. Absent. Chief Peter Bryan.
Here.
Chris Henshaw.
Here.
Chief Robert Nicolini. Absent. Leslie Wilson.
Here.
The first order of business is the approval of the 911 September 2011 meeting minutes. So in your handout is the meeting minutes, and has everybody had an opportunity to review?
Motion to approve.
Have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Mrs. Wong, Peter Bryan, I'd like to abstain since I was not at the meeting.
Okay. Minutes approved as written. I think that's the first time we've done that. Very good. Okay, and then we're going to move on now to unfinished business. And there's just a couple of items on our agenda regarding this. The first one is the State 911 Advisory Board meeting locations. We had some discussion at our last meeting whether they will continue to be in Sacramento or if we would be able to continue holding them in Southern California, San Diego. And the way that the executive order is written and our travel restrictions need to have a lot of support from the 911 office and the Public Safety Communications office in order to put these on. So I'm proposing that these meetings continue to stay in Sacramento. Is there discussion? Is there?
Leslie Wilson. I just think that in the future we just need to see if there's a venue or an opportunity where we might be able to have them if we can.
I agree with that. I like having them in Southern California so we're able to get people that can't always come to Sacramento.
And Lisa Hoffman, I just want to address that I think if things stabilize with regard to the budget and everything else that's going on, that we revisit this again at some time, that it not be a final forever mechanism, that we go back to reviewing it north-south when possible or feasible.
Okay, what I can do is leave it on unfinished business, and we can kind of just address it just quickly at each of our meetings. Okay. So as of right now, our next board meeting, which will be in March, will be in Sacramento. The second item is the State 911 Advisory Board committee meetings, and we had agreed that we would have the committee meetings prior or after the advisory board. Today was the first time that we had the committee meetings prior to our meeting today, which is why we're meeting in the afternoon. And I wanted to get feedback from the committee members and any of the advisory board members that did attend to find out if this worked, if this is something that we can continue doing, and just talk about and get feedback.
As chair of the committee, I'll take first shot at it. It went very well. We definitely want to have the committee meetings prior to the advisory board meeting because we have a number of recommendations we'll be bringing forward. We think it'll reduce the amount of time we spend in the advisory board meetings quite a bit and make it more business-like. And we also would recommend that this be a 2-day process where the committee meets on the day before the advisory board meeting because 3 or 4 hours just wasn't enough time to cover everything that we needed to cover or that we're going to need to cover in the future. The committee activity is going to be extensive. So we're going to need additional time. So having the committee meeting the day before the advisory board meeting, then being able to bring the advisory board, our recommendations on the following day. It seems to be the most effective use of the time.
Any other comments?
Mrs. Wong, Peter Bryan, I would certainly support and agree with what Mr. Henshaw said. And in the 2 hours, it allowed us a certain amount of work time, but certainly I can see that expanding to where it requires additional hours, as Chris has indicated. And I think it may be difficult to try and get in more hours on the same day. Plus, it also means, of course, that the board meeting needs to be in the afternoon. And if it's more conducive to run the board meeting in the morning, I think it will also help with the committee meeting being the previous day.
And for everyone that travels, it seems like if the board meeting's in the morning, it gives you time to get back to your office. And no more comments? I'm glad to hear that that was successful. We will continue having then the committee meetings a day prior to the advisory board meetings, and then we'll hold the advisory board meetings in the morning. New business, there's just a couple of items on here. Counting a conference reimbursement resolution.
Pardon me, Chair, we missed a couple items here.
Oh, my God. Excuse me, we certainly did. Reports. Said that the board meetings would be faster. I just like jumped. Sorry about that. Okay, we'll now move on to reports. The California 911 Division update. Ryan Doolin. Thank you.
Morning, I'm Ryan Doolin, the Chief of the California 911 Division. I wanted to go ahead and good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. The next series of updates are those items of interest to the board and on the activities of the California 911 Division. Tracking document labeled handout number 3 is provided in your packet. The handout captures all the requests as a result of the 911 advisory board meetings and only includes those items from 2011 going forward. I'm not going to cover each individual task alone. However, the action category on the document reflects the most recent activity taken on each request received by the office. So just want to recommend that you review that and let us know if anything's missing. Another action I would like to share with the board is the division filed comments to the FCC proceeding in the matter of facilitating the deployment of text to 911 and other next generation applications, which was docket number 11153 of the FCC on December 12th. And those items are on the FCC as the state of California's official position on that proceeding. Any questions on those items?
I just have one question. Were they sent out to the board members?
We did not send those out to the board members, so I can take that as an action item to distribute to the board members after the meeting.
Okay.
Then you would have a copy of that docket. Now on to the project status, if there's no questions on those items. The first project is the Routing on Empirical Data project. It's on schedule to complete by the end of this year with our last phase in LA County. To date, we still have about 20 PSAPs not taking their wireless 911 calls. We will be putting that list together as we talked about in our last advisory board and sharing that with the board in January. So that would be a complete list of those PSAPs not taking their wireless 911 calls. And we would like to recommend to the board members that they reach out to their respective constituents so that we can make progress in this area and have 100% compliance statewide. The ECATS project is working through data issues and reporting capabilities that the PSAPs have requested. I've received very positive feedback from the community regarding the updates and progress we've made in the last several months regarding ECATS. And I wanted to personally thank my staff, Wes Nita, Doug Peck, and Sharice Bartlett, as well as our service providers, Verizon and Direct Technologies, for getting a handle on these issues and resolving them. And also wanted to mention the participation of Don in Verdugo Fire for being available for testing, as well as Hanan Harb in the San Diego County area for helping the office with testing in this area. Any other questions on the projects? And then the last significant update is the Next Generation 911 pilot projects. There's been a lot of discussion around these items. Like I've mentioned in our past advisory board, we have 5 approved Next Generation 911 pilot projects statewide. We are currently not taking additional Next Generation 911 requests to deploy equipment until we get a handle on these projects, deal with funding questions, as well as see what direction the state is going to go. We're trying to compare the different vendors in the space and the different solutions, and we feel within the 5 pilot projects that we have right now, we have a really good slice of the market to go ahead and do our comparison, so we're not expanding that beyond. But however, I just wanted to share with the advisory board, we do have additional PSAPs, which are your constituents that are interested in Next Generation 911 deployment. We encourage folks to still work with their consultants in the office, and we'll be keeping a list of those that are interested so that we do make a determination. We'll be reaching out and doing it on a first-come, first-served basis as we expand that.
I have a question. If has there been a spec issued for parameter for what they're going to be allowed to apply for in this?
When you say a spec issue, what does that mean?
A specification issued. In other words, if I come along and I say, well, gee, I'd like to get funded for Next Gen 911 for my agency, and I come up with my Star Wars anti-ballistic missile project, what's to say that that's within the scope or not?
Right. What we're doing is taking a specific request from the different PSAPs and then comparing that against the solutions that are in the space right now. We're open to anything new, but we do have to evaluate it against what it actually is out there today and if it makes sense on a statewide basis. So there's some people that these are going to be new ideas, and we want to evaluate those based on the requests that come in. We don't have set criteria right now. We have a couple of procurement vehicles, which is CalNet 2, and we're using those service providers off of that current procurement. However, I know that Mendocino has issued a request for RFI, and so they are seeing what's in the space and then evaluating that, and they're in contact with our office on vetting those issues and their business needs. So we'd like to evaluate each proposal on its own since there's no solid criteria right now for next-gen solutions.
I just think there's some opportunities to approach, maybe to approach it in an additional way, other than waiting for agencies to come in, and it's going to be primarily vendor-driven to the specific agency, as opposed to putting something out to the vendors as a community and saying we'd like you to come to the agency with some next-gen proposals, so that that can start to be examined ahead of time. I mean, right now we have the potential of having five projects just based on those that have made the application for funding. Right. And I don't have an issue with that, but it seems to me that there's an opportunity for us to embrace the forward thinking of the industry and say, okay, they're looking at things nationally, also at the same time, and say, you know, what is it that you would like to see the state of California considering for this for next gen? So eventually, we're going to be in a mode with the next gen funding being part of the SETNA, right, you know, the regular requests, and I think that would put us much further ahead. Each agency coming along now with another provider and saying, hey, we've got somebody new here we'd like.
Right, and our office is in contact with a lot of the major players in the industry on a monthly basis, so we do meet with those leadership on their roadmap and so forth for solutions. I know that we had a discussion this morning in the long-range planning committee of identifying a stakeholder, which Chris is going to be given an update in his area, and I think the service providers and solution providers is one of the stakeholders that need to be on that list, in addition to creating focus groups outside of that. So I know that we are going to be working with a stakeholder list and then trying to do that reach out for particular focus groups, and I think that might be the mechanism to start receiving proposals or solutions from those folks that have not traditionally been involved in the delivery of 911 solutions.
I have a question, Ryan. With L.R. Kimball and their report, they're going to have some of those recommendations, right, looking nationally at what other people are doing, and then a projected cost estimate. So is that something we need to wait for to move forward with some of these projects?
Well, I know that they are going to be looking at the rough order of magnitude cost estimate, which is just the cost for the particular next-gen solution. We're also going to be doing some of that work in the roadmap, which I know that the Long-Range Planning Committee is going to be kind of dissecting and reviewing where they play a role in the roadmap as well. I wouldn't think that LR Kimball would come forward with a particular recommendation on service providers, but we will be talking about the methodology for people to get involved in 911, to receive proposals and do analysis on the requirements and see who meets those requirements. So we will be developing the criteria for where we evaluate the solutions as part of the roadmap. So they will be involved in those, or a consultant group that we actually hire to do that.
Okay, and just so I'm not confused, but I thought that LR Kimball was going to be looking at some of those other states that have gone before us and some of those infrastructures that have been built and comparing that to what we have today in California and what we might potentially be able to use.
I think they have the industry experience. However, they were hired to work specifically on the roadmap and to also do the project management portion of our E91 grant project. We don't have any ongoing consultant contract with them to develop the criteria and then work on the implementation of the roadmap. We will be soliciting and going through the regular procurement for those items, but LR Kimball has not been selected for that activity. They're just right now working on the rough order cost magnitude, the regulatory and legislative considerations document, and they're the project manager on the E91 grant project. So each specific task has to go out for a procurement competitive bid, and then whoever wins those bids will be hiring.
Ryan, Lisa Hoffman, I have a question. So I'm just looking ahead and trying to focus on what we're looking at now. Is the State 911 Office considering the I3 from Nena's recommendation as part of the overall process? It's kind of vendor agnostic with the standards. Are we going to adopt that as a state office and say that's the platform we're going to be looking for everybody to match up in? Vendor agnostic, because I think anybody should be allowed to play as long as they meet the criteria, rather than have each person bring to the front their idea of what it should look like, and then if at some later time we decide to adopt a platform or a specification, having everybody to have to refund again to come up to that standard. That's what I'm concerned about with SEPA. So has the state, where are we with that?
Right. We're looking at, that's what we're going to be using these 5 pilot projects, and I'll go through the specifics as far as where each pilot project is. We will be evaluating I3 standards as well as, or recommendations out of Nena. We'll also be looking at other international standards body like ANSI or ISRI, those specific conversations that come out of the creation of standards out of those recognized standards body. So we'll be weighing all of those in the solution that we go forward with, as with the practicability of our current 5 pilot project deployments. So it may look good as a standard and interface on paper, but we know that's why we're using these pilot projects to actually demonstrate what works. Also, how do we facilitate it with the PSAPs? Because we have communication issues that we have to work out with the PSAPs that we're finding out right now in the E91 grant project, and also what works for them. So one solution might not fit all. We have to also account for different needs from rural, medium-sized, large-sized PSAPs and metropolitan PSAPs, which may be different. So we're looking at all of those, and we're going to be using the 5 pilot projects to then produce lessons learned or reports out of that to then determine a statewide solution. So to answer your question, we're looking at all of the standards bodies, and as the industry matures, we're taking those considerations as we get them. And that's why we want to really limit it to the 5 pilot projects right now, so that we're not wasting money on deployment. So we want to find out what solutions are out there in the market space, where are their gaps, and then how are we going to fill those gaps.
We set specific requirements for each of the pilot, and one thing that when Ryan and I talked a little bit about this, we did not want to stray off of our goals for each of the pilot. So we want to complete the pilots as we had designed them to get the outcomes, instead of changing them midstream. But we do need to be looking at the new standards on the I-3, definitely.
I'll go into the specifics for each of those 5 projects and so that you guys can know where we're at in those. For the E91 grant project in the northeast part of California, we've completed the proof of concept on 14 of the 30 PSAPs for next generation 911 network. There's testing on the remaining 16 PSAPs, which will take place in January of 2012 with PSAP concurrence. And we will also begin proof of concept testing for the XY location-based routing mid-January 2012. And given everything goes well, California, we expect to be the first in the nation to actually demonstrate XY routing. And we are working closely with the federal government on the results of that and reporting on an annual basis to the feds. Second one is Ventura County continues to meet with AT&T to get answers to their questions regarding the solution and just all the details that go around that to meet their business needs. We'll be moving into implementation once those questions are addressed and that the PSAP has given the okay with their questions, that they've been answered fully. Imperial County had equipment installed in August of this year and is completely cut over to a hosted solution. And then my office will be working with the PSAPs and evaluating the solution the first quarter of 2012. So those are the reports or outcomes that we're going to be sharing with the board on how those solutions are working, how the relationship is with the state office, the PSAPs, and the vendor on deployment, and how the support and maintenance would be looked at going forward. The Pasadena Ring project received final pricing mid-November 2011, and we're currently working with the Ring project leadership on their funding questions because of the amount of PSAPs that are involved in that and their upgrade or recycle of the equipment. They do have some funding questions that we need to work with them. I was just on a call this week with the leadership, and we plan on having a face-to-face meeting. I think it's the first week in January, first or second week in January, to finalize those. Once the questions are answered on the funding mechanism, we'll be going forward with the implementation with that project. And right now there's, I believe there's 8 PSAPs in the core group and expanding that beyond the 8 after that. Mendocino County, like I talked with you before, received responses from service providers to their request for information solicitation. My understanding was that there were 7 responses. We'll be meeting with the project late January 2012 to discuss the outcome of their evaluation of those responses and how they want to proceed with those. I want to go back to the grant project. There was a question brought up at the last advisory board meeting just with respect, or there's questions out there in the PSAP community on the cost of the E91 grant project. I just want to reiterate, we do have a fact sheet out there on our website that details all of the funding associated with that grant project, but it's $8.6 million to fund the project for 37 PSAPs, and half of that is federally funded, so 4.3 with matching state dollars, which come out of the CETNA fund. And currently we have expended to date $1.1 million. And we're expecting the bulk of those expenditures to come out of the first quarter of 2012. So that concludes my updates. And are there any questions?
I'm sorry, I do have a question. Where on your website? Because I have your website up and I can't find it.
The fact sheet should be under projects.
Projects, thank you.
Yeah, I can walk through that with you after the meeting if you like.
Okay, we'll move to the next report now, Long Range Planning Committee. Chris Henshaw.
Hey, the Long Range Planning Committee met this morning for the first time in many moons. Present were myself, Chief Bryant, Chris Herron for Sheriff Bonner, and Michelle Bland for Chief Chappelle. First item of discussion was 911 strategic plan review and update, the need to review and update the strategic plan based on recent changes in the FCC rulings and other issues. Out of that discussion, came the first recommendation that we're going to make to the board, which is the need for the committee to be a working committee and to meet more frequently than quarterly. And we would like the board to approve our meeting more frequently and to direct staff to report back on methods for doing that, such as teleconferencing or other opportunities, and using toll-free phone numbers for that teleconferencing or whatever other issue we do it, so the agencies aren't faced with an additional cost to accommodate those meetings. So I would make a motion on that recommendation to direct the committee to meet as needed more than quarterly, and to direct staff to develop a methodology for those meetings to occur in accordance with Begley-Keene restrictions.
Second by Brian.
We have some discussion.
Okay.
In looking at the committee structure, and I think some of us have talked about this in general terms, not specifics about any agendized item, that as the committees are stood up for the advisory board, that it would be of significant benefit to try and get those committees participated in by maybe one member of the board, but to pull the technical people from resources within the representative group or the associations that are here to serve on those committees. The advantage then being is that we don't get into challenges between what the committee is doing recommendation wise and what the board has to take as an advisory board based upon that information. I think it also has some benefits of not getting the time commitment of the individual board members locked down so tight that it has a negative impact on the other responsibilities that everybody has. Not suggesting that any of you on here by any means don't have the ability to make that level of commitment, but I think that for those that want to participate or be part of that, it's a tremendous commitment. Start working on the committee process. So if I use Chief Chappelle as an example, that somebody from CHP is committed to a working group subcommittee, then that group puts together that information. Those reports would come up to our committee. Does that resonate with anybody?
Yeah, we discussed that at the committee meeting this morning, and what we came up with was the committee will be the interface between the advisory board and the working groups, and that the working groups would have possibly one board member or possibly not have any board members on it, but would be formed from subject matter experts from the PSAPs or the vendor community or wherever they needed to be formed from. That would come back to the committee. The committee would relate it to the spectrum of other issues and then make recommendations to the advisory board.
So then these working groups then become, it sounds like we put another tier of approval in the process by doing that.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, as an observer at the meeting, I think it gives an opportunity to vet out those things before it comes to the board meeting with a centralized committee that understands the history and the process and can bring those recommendations forward or push it back for more work to be done before it comes to this committee.
Okay, well, anything's more progress than what we're doing now.
It's true.
Thank you.
So there was a motion to direct the committee as, let me make sure I get this right, as to meet more often than quarterly. And it sounds like the motion included that we would have staff members from different constituencies of the board. Is that part of the
No,
motion?
the motion was that the committee would meet as necessary more than quarterly to conduct business, and that we would direct staff from the 911 office to develop the methodology for those meetings that was in accordance with Begley-Keene restrictions.
Okay, and then there was a second, and we've had discussion. So, any more discussion?
Chris, could I suggest, I think we had talked about asking that there be a 30-day, or 30 days provided for the State 911 office to give us a response on the technology that would be used.
Yeah.
Could we add that to the...
My bad. Add that to the motion, that staff to report back within 30 days on the methodology.
And I do have one comment on that, that it's going to make it different on the type of technology that we use if we have board members on the committee or if we do not have board members on the committee to meet Begley-Keene.
Yeah, there are going to be board members on the committee.
Okay.
So it has to meet Begley-Keene restrictions.
Okay. So are we ready for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, motion passed.
Okay, our second item of discussion was around the Next Gen 911 proposed roadmap, what the next steps were, identifying stakeholders and facilitating focus group meetings. The committee will assist the office in determining the stakeholder groups and developing primary, secondary, tertiary levels of stakeholders. The primary level was discussed, and we're looking at probably in the primary level having fire, police, sheriff, PSAPs, CCs, county coordinators, and legislature, because we've got a major educational effort to make in those areas. Work on developing the presentation of the roadmap for a road show, and based on the presentation that the 911 office has already put together and has delivered to the fire chief's communications section in Southern California that seemed to be well accepted, and to work on adapting that road show as a train the trainer, with a train the trainer element, so that we can expand the group of people who are delivering the roadshow information to the public and to the other stakeholders. So to that end, I would make a motion. Actually, I don't think we need a motion on that. That was just informational. So we'll be working with the office on those items.
I do have a question. Were there any timelines put together or due dates on some of this as far as identifying the stakeholders? And so when we would want to go out and start letting everyone know about the roadmap and where we're going? Because
no, we didn't do any timelines because we still don't know how we're going to meet. Okay. How we're going to make this happen, since we can't talk to each other without violating Begley-Keene. So it's either put together a working group on the fly made of non-board members, or come up with the methodology for us to get together. So that was one of the reasons for the 30-day report back on how we're going to do this.
Okay. I'll commit to it for the 911 office. We'll have this done in 30 days. I look at
Ryan did too.
Yeah, because we want to be able to get this out to the public quickly. And so 30 days is reasonable to find a venue or a way we could set up the meeting so we can go forward.
Chris Herron, do we want to put a motion before the board to agree to those? I think we had sort of 5 primary stakeholders that we identified this morning, and then the forum, the recommended forum for the State 911 office to get the message out to those 5 primary stakeholders. I guess I'd look to the other members of the committee on whether we need to do that.
Well, I'd like to comment on something. I think that I wasn't at the meeting this morning as much as I would have liked to have been, but didn't want us to get crossways with how many members were on this board or on this committee, I think that what I'm hearing for work and results out of the meeting this morning is outstanding. This is great. But I still think that that we walk a fine line between setting parameters and dictation to CTA and the 911 office as an advisory committee. I think that it's good that the way that it was couched by Mr. Henshaw, saying that the committee will assist the office in identifying the stakeholders. But I think it's the 911 office's responsibility to set this in motion so that the roadmaps and getting this out is the responsibility of the 911 office, certainly with the assistance and the support of this advisory board and its contributions. But it's both an authority and a responsibility situation. 911 office has the authority to do this, and it is the 911 office's responsibility. It is our responsibility to help support and provide input to that process. I don't know that that's much different than what you're offering, but it's certainly stated a different way.
Yeah.
So to that end, I don't think we need to take a motion on the issue other than to provide input and say this as your committee has, produced this is our recommendation, the information that you're moving forward to that, and that the board hears that in this as this body, and absent anyone having heartburn or an issue with it, then it goes forward as recommendation to the 911 office.
Mrs. Wong, Peter Bryan, following up as a committee member, I think probably to answer and maybe comment on some of Chief Spiegel's comments, or certainly his points, we saw a couple of primary tasks, and the first one was that Ryan was going to send us out the presentation material that was delivered to the communications section for the California Fire Chiefs. Let the committee look at that material and also get some feedback from how that was delivered and also received. And the second thing was really, as I think Chief Spiegel, you indicated, is to provide some suggestions on who these stakeholders could be, and then let the office take it from there initially and say, okay, we've received some feedback on the presentation, we've maybe reformatted or maybe revised that, but have a presentation and have a list of stakeholders, and then how they deliver that message, and whether that includes some other people, but certainly how the office proposes to deliver that message.
And then also, as an observer, it was also the train-the-trainer pieces to be able to have people in the industry be able to go out there and deliver that message with one consistent message that everyone had a chance to have input with.
Chris Aaron, just I think the reason that I made the suggestion, and I do understand your point, Chief, was that Ryan this morning sort of presented those three things as this is what we would like your help on. Prioritize the stakeholders, identify the forum in which we can get the message out, and then what is it that we're going to get out. So that's what the committee was trying to give back to the 911 office. So my suggestion was just whether or not the board wanted or needed to have a motion to approve that, or if we're fine with just the committee's recommendations.
To me, they're committee recommendations, and I don't know that we have to take an action by the board. So if we're all in agreement of that, were there additional information from the Long Range Planning Committee to report out on?
On that subject, yeah, I got one more thing. One more issue on that was the focus group meetings. We discussed those, and it was our recommendation to the 911 office that they utilize those meetings that are already occurring, such as the Cal Nena Annual Conference, the California State Fire Chiefs Association Conference, the California State Police Chiefs Conference, the California State Sheriff's Conference, and there's a number of these conferences and things that are occurring around the state all year long, and those are all opportunities to go and present this message. And for the most part, most of them are always asking for something that's relevant to their mission to be provided to their membership as a presentation. And this is certainly relevant to all of those members that we identified as the primary groups, being fire, police, sheriff, PSAPs, and legislature. We also discussed the possibility of, once we solidify the presentation a little bit, seeking concurrence from the Public Safety Committee of the legislature to request a hearing to discuss Next-Gen 911 in a committee hearing at the legislature, which would then be video broadcast to the other members of the legislature and would get some wider disbursement among the legislature than we currently have, and get them used to the idea that we are going to be coming to them and hitting them up for money, because this is going to cost a chunk.
Anytime we can educate all of our stakeholders with all of what we're doing with NextGen is truly a bonus. I'm really pleased with the outcome of the Long Range Planning Committee. Quite a bit was discussed, it looks like.
We have more.
Oh, we have more.
We discussed funding the Next-Gen 911 and grant opportunities. And we agreed that the committee and the working group should assist the 911 office in identifying what grant opportunities come up, because all of us receive emails and notifications all the time of grant opportunities within our specific area of expertise or involvement. Fire has different grants than law does. State has different grants than local government does. So those grant opportunities, as they come up, notify the state 911 office in case they haven't gotten the word, so that they can try to take advantage of those opportunities. And we also had a recommendation to bring back to the board, which was that we recommend to the state 911 office that they develop a grant application processing process within the office, either by staffing a position within the 911 office to seek and write grant opportunities, or developing a contract for a consulting company who could work on grant opportunities. It was also discussed that there might be opportunities to leverage on grant writers within agencies throughout the state. Some cities and counties have grants writing staff that possibly we could contract to one of the local government agencies to do grant writing on behalf of the state 911 office. So the recommendation from the committee to the board would be to a motion to direct staff to seek grant opportunities for the support of the Next-Gen 911, and to identify the methodology and process for identifying, writing, and obtaining grant funding.
Mrs. Wong and Shaw, if I can add to that, the committee discussion was included that the office would report back at the next board meeting on its efforts and status to implement that by the next board meeting. If I'm correct.
Amend my motion to add that.
I don't want to be the fly in the ointment, but I'm still going back to the same thing. I don't think it's within the authority of this advisory board to direct the office, and that's what I'm having an issue with. And maybe it's just a choice of words, Chris. I think that that the work is very productive, and I think the advice carries a lot of weight. But it's the 911 office's responsibility to manage their job responsibilities with the input and advice from this group. And I have a problem with this board directing the office to implement a position. I'm very supportive of of saying that we want to see the 911 office addressing every opportunity that there is to obtain grants, and leave that to the administrators in the 911 office to choose the best possible way that they can access that those grant resources, whether that is to go out to a consultant for grant writing or to send something out because we've found that there is an opportunity for a certain grant, and maybe there's an agency within the state that's particularly familiar with that grant funding source. I'm still trying to go back to, I want the office to own the responsibility for getting the stuff done, but at the same time recognize that's within their authority to do, and I don't think it's within our authority to direct them to facilitate an expenditure for staffing purposes.
Substitute recommend for direct.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We have more?
Of course. Discussion on the county coordinators' input involvement for long-range planning and Next Gen 911 and the county coordinator task force charter. It was the recommendation from the committee to make a couple of changes in the proposed task force charter. First, under the section titled Leadership, remove and final authority. Actually, that's second, but remove and final authority. The first item was under purpose to indicate that the task force is advisory in nature. Third was to identify the 911 division member as a voting member only in cases of a tie. Other than that, they would be a non-voting member of the CCTF. And in the cases of the biennial recharter, the peer review, both initial and annual, that those reports be brought back to the advisory committee for review.
Okay, I all of a sudden got confused. On the biannual meetings and the charter and the review, it would go back to the county coordinator task force?
No, not the biannual meetings, the biennial peer review.
Okay.
Each member of the CCTF gets reviewed by their peers. So we would like to see that information come back to the advisory board for
Okay.
review. Both the initial and the annual reports. And then there's one of the last provisions in the charter is for a biennial rechartering of the CCTF. I'd like to see that rechartering effort brought to the advisory board for review as well. Want to try and put that in the form of a motion? Chief?
I'd be happy to. I'd like to make a motion that the County Coordinator Task Force Charter, which included the supplement that was received in draft form, be amended as was discussed at the committee meeting and reviewed here, and that the charter be approved with those changes.
And so you would be recommending that the 911 office would accept the charter for the county coordination?
Correct.
That would be a recommendation.
And I will second that motion.
Discussion?
Yes, Reggie Chappelle. I would hope that well, is this a draft or is this a final that the 911 office would accept as is without edits, or would you take this as a draft and make adjustments? Kind of a question I would have. And then along those lines, the bottom of page 1, it talks about the different regions. Are those already existing regions? So maybe that's if someone were to say northern region, we know exactly which counties or areas. Just by way of example, and then like the membership, who selects the members. I see who selects the chairperson. The members are voting the chairperson, but I'm wondering who selects the members that represent each of those regions. And not that those questions have to be answered right now, but I think that if this were accepted as a draft document where some of those questions could be answered, then you have an opportunity to maybe.
Probably would need to have at least a map of California to identify the regions so everybody agrees that those are the regions.
Yeah, I believe they're loosely defined in the 911 operations manual, but yeah, it'd probably be easier to have it on a map so we could really, present those to the advisory board.
And actually part of the charter, I would think, would help too for all the members.
Yeah, and if they're pre-existing, maybe just a reference to them, might be sufficient. I wouldn't have known where to look for them, but I guess my overall point is there's probably some fine-tuning or tweaking to do so that if it is accepted by the 911 office, that they accept it as a draft with the understanding that there may be some language tweaks that may have to occur.
I would agree specifically on the selection process, because the initial selection process is not in concrete and it's not on here. The ongoing selection process is a peer selection process, and that is in here. So the initial selection process needs to be codified.
Right, and we talked about that this morning. This is in draft form. We'll take the recommendation, make the changes that are recommended that we see fit, that we concur with all of those recommendations. We don't see any problem with that. And then we will also take some of your comments. Since the CCTF did resign, that initial selection will have to be incorporated into the supplemental, like Chris and the committee recommended, that we would take all the applications once we floated the final charter out there, and then we would, the board would determine the first selection, and then after that we would fall into a regular cycle on the peer review. So right now it's a draft. We'll take the recommendations as they go forward, the board motion, and then we'll make changes and then float that back out to the committee for concurrence.
Mrs. Wong, and I would add to my original motion that we authorize, or that it includes the ability of the office to make some administrative procedural implementations to essentially affect what this task force charter would do, realizing that there must be some of that to administratively implement this, especially the first time.
My only concern is I think the county coordinator task force is essential for us because the state is so large. What I would be concerned about is we may not be able to go forward with getting the county coordinator task force until after March. Is that what we're talking about?
And I don't believe we had a timeline on this. It was just a discussion and a recommendation on approval of the charter supplement with these changes.
Because if it needs to come back to the full board, that would be in March.
That's fine. So I'll second the motion as amended by Chief Bryant.
Any further discussion?
I'm sorry, Lisa Hoffman. Can I hear the question again, or call for the question, or the recommendation for the vote? What was it? Frame it again for me. Can you say it again?
Want a reading of the motion?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, got lost.
The motion is to approve the charter for the county coordinator task force with the supplement included, as was discussed at the long-range planning committee today, and to include the ability for the office to make the administrative implementation of that task force.
Which is difficult for those of us that weren't at the meeting to know what those things are.
And those are the things that I read off, the making the task force advisory in nature, removing the final authority from the leadership section, making the 911 division member a voting member only in case of a tie, and bringing the biennial recharter and the peer review, both initial and annual, back to the advisory board for review.
That I understand. Thank you.
Are we ready for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Chappelle, nay.
Okay. One opposition. Chief Chappelle, thank you very much. We'll move on. Do you have more
Last
from-
item. Last item is we recommend that the advisory board review the membership on the long-range planning committee, determine if the membership is correct and appropriate, and elect a new chair. Because I ain't going to be here.
Their discussion? Recommendations? Does the board want to go forward? Is that a motion?
It's not a motion, it's a
Motion?
recommendation that
Okay.
this is activity that the board needs to take. It's a board committee, so the board membership is what it is currently. Currently, the members of the committee are myself, Chief Chappelle, Chief Bryan, Sheriff Bonner, and either Karen Wong or Ryan Doolin. There's a slash in there. And whether that is an appropriate membership on this committee or that needs to be changed, if anybody wants to move around, if we want to add people to that, so we can do that first. And then the second would be to elect a new chair for the committee.
Okay, as this would be a board action, we'll put it on the agenda for the next month's meeting. And so if everybody can give some thoughts on how they would like to have this kind of staffed, then we will take it up at the next meeting.
And that concludes our report from the committee meeting this morning.
Okay, we're going to move now on to new business. I don't think I've missed anything again. The County and the Conference reimbursement resolution, I just wanted to report back to the board that that has been resolved, and the PSAPs will be reimbursed, staff will be reimbursed for attendance to the County and the Conference. And the letter did go out. And then the second item for new business is the County Coordinator Task Force. The committee took that up, as we just discussed earlier, the Long Range Planning Committee. So I don't think there's anything else to discuss on that, unless you guys have some additional information.
I have a question, Karen. You
Sure.
indicated that the PSAPs are going to be reimbursed. Are the county coordinators not going to be reimbursed to attend CalMeeting?
County Coordinators also reimbursed, sorry. Yes.
And then I'm not, it's kind of in the same vein, but it might be off course, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Initially, there had been some discussion about the Nena reimbursement. Is there anything more with that?
There's nothing further to discuss on that right now.
So there's not going to be reimbursement for that?
No, that's not what I said.
I'm so-
We
I'm
had
looking
talked
for guidance.
about reimbursing. I do need to go back and talk with Brian Fonts on, similar to what we did with CalNENA. It needs to be training, and we need to go through that with him. But we're very committed to Nena coming to California. It's really kind of a good opportunity for all of us.
Okay.
Chris Herron, I have a question on the reimbursement as well. With CalNENA, is that something that that CalNENA and the State 911 Office have agreed to meet on a yearly basis, or did you talk at all about, okay, we're going to fund for 2011, but what about beyond that, so that they can plan accordingly?
We'll be looking at the Setna funds, which is later on the agenda. We need to completely go back and look at what is paid out of the Setna funds and what is not. That will be one of the things that we do need to discuss at a later date to let everybody know, like when the fiscal year starts, what they can plan on having for funding.
Chris Henshaw, one of the things we discussed in those negotiations was the CalNENA annual allotment is identified in the 911 operations manual. Definitely need to revisit all of the 911 operations manual and reimbursement based on the current status of Setna and the future funding opportunities for Setna. But we also discussed in those negotiations that ongoing, the CalNENA annual conference, we will include someone from the State 911 office in the conference committee. So they will be involved in the development of the conference, and they'll have complete transparency on how we do it, what we're doing, the types of educational opportunities we're providing at the conference. So open that transparency between the 911 office and the CalNENA organization so that we don't have any more of these kinds of issues.
Thank you. And just on behalf of Sheriff Bonner, he and I spoke on this topic yesterday. We'd like to extend our appreciation to CalNENA and the State 911 office for working through that matter.
Thank you.
Chris, I do have a question on, in the years when Nena has a conference in California, does CalNENA combine their conference with Nena for that?
Well,
'cause I can see a significant expenditure in a year, supporting Nena and CalNENA, and
what we
can at least be looked at.
What we do, the CalNENA annual allotment allows for reimbursement for attendance at CalNENA events, training events, which include the annual conference and our quarterly meetings. Our quarterly meetings, we do away with at least one quarterly meeting, in some cases 2 quarterly meetings, in order to reduce the reimbursement onus on the State 911 office. This year, we're deleting one of our quarterlies in order to reduce that. This year is a little bit unusual because the Nena annual conference was not supposed to be held in California. The state where it was supposed to be held said that they could not host it. So Nena reached into the grab bag and pulled out California. So it was a surprise to all of us. And we welcome Nena coming to California. We see that there's going to be plenty of benefit, to all of us by having them here. We certainly don't have any problem with Nena coming here this year, but it has created some issues for us because we weren't able to pre-plan as we usually do for the event. But in a normal annual year when the Nena conference is coming to the state of California, we do adjust our quarterly conferences to allow for the reimbursement for the Nena conference.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the next item that we have for new business is the state emergency telephone number account, and those are handouts number 4, 5, and 6. Has everybody had an opportunity to review these? Discussion? We wanted to present this to the board so the board knows what we're looking at. In our timeline that we have, which is handout 6, we kind of backtracked for everyone. So as part of transparency for the 911 office on when we first became aware of some of the budget issues in the Setna Fund and the action that we've taken since then. We will be going through review, and we will be looking at what we're spending and what we're reimbursing on today, and what we need to be doing in the future. We will be bringing this back to the board, any recommendations that we have on how we change reimbursements or funding, and we will have that discussion at the next board meeting. We're in the process now of going through the analysis, and we want to wait to finish our analysis prior to presenting it to the board.
On the timeline, is that accurate, that 9/19/11, that the Because the magnitude cost estimate report is not done, right?
It's going through the review. It should be out the first couple of weeks in January.
Okay, so then we should have that before the next board meeting then?
Yes, you will. You'll have it shortly.
And then, can you talk a little bit about the surcharge, and there was not a recommended increase?
Part of going back, as we were looking at this and whether we should go and request an increase, we wanted to go and do the full analysis of where the funding is so we can go back and show where our funding is going, what's appropriate, what we may need to change for next generation 911, and do the full analysis before we go back and ask for an increase in any surcharges.
I just want to confirm on these sheets, that's in thousands, not millions, right?
Yes.
I would want to, Chris Henshaw, I'd want to point out that in fiscal year 05-06, our actual revenues from Setna were $132 million. In 2010-11, it's $86 million. So a lot of the things that we used to do with Setna money, we're not going to be able to continue to do, number one. Number two, we need to identify additional methods for replenishing the Setna account. I know there are some legislative things still underway, such as assessing fees for VoIP 911 calls. But we need to be very diligent about finding those other opportunities to enhance the Setna fund, because we can't continue to survive with a $100 million deficit occurring.
Correct. Which is why we're doing the analysis, that we can bring a recommendation to the board on. There will be some things that we will be recommending that we just don't continue funding in the future. However, as we keep looking toward next generation 911, I do believe there's a lot of opportunity out there for additional funding. So we're also looking very closely at where we can be bringing in additional funds for the Setna. Further discussion? There'll be more to come at the next meeting. Okay, then the agenda items for future meetings. I had talked about having our information security officer come to the meeting, so that's still on for future meetings. A Warren Act review. It's very timely as we're looking at the Setna Fund and Next Generation 911 to also be looking at the Warren Act. The status of the PSAPs taking the wireless 911 calls. RED will be completed, and we will have a status, and we'll need to get recommendations from the board on how to move forward with getting everyone to take the wireless calls. And then the outage and notification and escalation. That will be on future meetings. Did anybody want to add any other items for future meetings?
Yes, I would. We're progressing well in getting materials ahead of the meetings. I would like to propose, at least for the office's consideration, that to help you with setting agendas and to help us in preparation of the meetings, most of us that either work with county or city governments have a staff report deadline, that something has to be in and approved as a staff report or handouts that would go with an agendized item. So if you have to finalize the agenda for publication, if the staff report is not done for that agenda item, the item falls from the agenda. Or put another way, we have to back up the time frame that people need to get things into the office so that the staff work can be completed. Ideally, then, what we could reasonably expect as board members is that when the agenda is sent out, the agenda is sent out with any of the staff reports or attachments at that time, which gives everyone sufficient time to digest those things, seek additional information if need be. I think it's in the long run is a win-win for both the board and for the office, especially if we talk about it now and 30 days, actually more than 30 days out from our next meeting.
I totally support that, which is why we're trying to get the information prior. And we are doing better. And so the agenda goes out 10 days prior to the meeting. My only concern is if we miss a day or two on something that's really important to bring to the board, I'd hate to have it totally fall off. So if we are going to miss something, our commitment is to give all the agenda items and all the handouts with the agenda. If we're going to miss something, we will let you know in advance what that is and the date that you would get it. Because it helps all of us when everyone has an opportunity to review and be prepared for the meetings.
Yeah, I'd rather have one item trailing, 2 or 3 days before the meeting and still be able to look at the rest of the information than have 7 days to look at all of it.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Reggie Chappelle, I would always also suggest that if it's not an administrative burden, that perhaps the handout that was provided with the status of the Setna fund be a standing agenda item. If that's something that is easy enough to print and provide, with or without discussion, so that we can kind of see the status of the fund.
Excellent. No, I'll be glad to put that on there. And if there's discussion, then we can have discussion. If not, you'll always have the handout.
Let me interject on that one. We can give you a preliminary report on the Setna, but this is one on the fund condition from the Department of Finance. It's a little bit harder to get on a schedule. So we can take this information and just call it a preliminary Setna fund. It'll be close, but not down to the dollar like finance provides.
Absolutely. Even if it's just an internal estimation or, a different presentation of their numbers, but maybe some type of summary sheet based on their data. But I don't think it has to be exact. I think we know there's going to be outstanding transactions or something.
We can do that. No problem.
We will include the Setna funding as a standing item on the agenda. Okay, move forward for announcements.
Mrs. Wong, Peter Bryan, before we move off that, are we under another section then going to talk about 2012 dates besides March and set those dates? Or is that something you're going to have the office do?
I was going to have the office do that. But we will do them, I'm looking at Paul as I say this, we will do them for the year, but we'll be sending that out in January. Okay, now move forward to announcements.
Reggie Chappelle, effective January 1, I'll actually be transferring back to a field assignment. So at some point, probably before the next meeting, there will be a replacement from CHP that will represent me on the board and will submit the necessary paperwork to make it permanent. I've been in headquarters so long that most of you probably don't realize I'm actually a sworn member of the department, but I'm actually going to our coastal division office in San Luis Obispo for a hardship tour, so I will be there for the unforeseen future. It's been a pleasure working with all of you, and I will make sure that my replacement has some transition. I start in January, but I'll be overlapping for a few months, so we'll make sure that whoever it is hits the ground running. They haven't been picked yet, but we should know who that person is probably in a few days.
And Chris Henshaw, the Cal Nena annual conference this year is January 29th through the 31st at the San Diego Manchester Hyatt Grand Resort. We have 80 vendors, almost 80 vendors this year. We've got over 45 hours of training during the conference, and we have 48 hours, I believe it was, of pre-conference training available. So go to our website and check that out, www.calnena.org. Also, the Nena Annual Conference is coming to California this year, as we discussed. It'll be in Long Beach, June 9th through the 14th at the Long Beach Convention Center. And you can go to nena.org to look at that event and register for that event.
And then I have a few announcements here. I'd like to announce the retirement of Doug Peck in the Telecommunications Manager 1 in the 911 office, 911 division. And I'd like to thank him for his years of service. We're going through the recruitment process now to fill his position. I'd also like to announce the hiring of Monica Mcgrath, Section Manager for the Business Management over the 911 Emergency Communications Division in our office. And Monica is also, I've known her for years, she is really a welcomed addition to our office. I'd like to also announce that the California Routing on Empirical Data RED project was one of the 10 exemplary initiatives chosen as recipients for the National Association of State Chief Information Officers, the 2011 Recognition Award for the Outstanding Achievement in the field of information technology and state government. This was awarded in October of 2011. I also want to send out a special thanks and recognition to Jim Thompson of the 911 Emergency Communications Division and to Michelle Bland of the California Highway Patrol, and to the Public Safety Network consultants for fostering collaborative partnerships involving more than 500 private, state, and local government stakeholders in all of California's 58 counties. I'd also like to just let everybody know that as part of our package that we put together and that was requested through the National Association of the State Information Officers, we were asked to put together a video. It's unfortunate, and we deeply apologize that the video did offend some of our some of our partners and stakeholders. As soon as we found this out, we immediately removed the video, and it will not be up anywhere. So again, we apologize for that. And then my last announcement, I do want to let everyone know that I have been appointed as Director of Public Safety Communications Office by Governor Brown in December. So that's, well, thank you all very much. And is there any other announcements? Okay, I'd like to move to public comments.
You turn the switch on.
Lori Souter from Shascom 911, and I wanted to start by thanking the 911 office for reconsidering and being flexible and agreeing to fund the annual CalNENA conference. And also in conjunction with that, we always held the county coordinators forum, which was a biannual forum, and we took advantage of the travel costs that were paid for by our annual NENA allotments to attend the forum, and basically the only additional cost to the 911 office was generally one additional hotel night to stay so that the county coordinators could meet in person and go over, training and emerging technologies and things. And so I would like to ask that the state 911 office reconsider funding that, because in this current environment with constant changing technologies and new emerging technologies, it's mission critical right now to keep the county coordinators informed so that they can take that information back to the PSAPs.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? No? Okay. I'd like to move now toward our closed session. Pursuant to Government Code Section 11126C18, to review the details of our outages. I do need to have a 2/3 vote of the members present to hold the closed session on this topic.
Aye.
I need everybody to vote on this, please.
Aye.
Edgy?
Aye.
Okay. We do have our 2/3. The motion carries, so we will go ahead and have our closed session for approximately 15 minutes. So I would like to ask everyone to leave at this time, and we will reconvene in 15 minutes to the Okay, we're reconvened back to the public meeting. Discussion on the outage report. Ryan Doolin?
The outcome of the outage closed session, there were a total of 136 outages reported from September to November of 2011. No routine trends were identified during the reporting period, with most common outages attributed to alley failures, PSAP equipment issues, and community isolated incidents. The office has, at the recommendation of the board during closed session, committed to providing summary information over the last year, which would be in 2011, at the next board meeting with a summary of those outages and trending information. That concludes my update for the closed session.
Any comments? Okay, we're at the end of our meeting. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.